Someone pounded on the door just as I was getting ready to go down the aisle, lace veil in place, and bouquet in hand, my heart pounding with nerves and hope. There was a gentle, suspicious knock on the door, not from the wedding planner, and most definitely not from my maid of honor. This person was a security guard. With a low but enthusiastic voice, he leaned in and partially opened the door to the wedding chamber. A young woman named Miss Miller was just captured at the back service gate. "The picture you sent is spot on. It's your brother, Madison itself." Suddenly I froze. Something changed in the atmosphere. My whole arm shot up. He said she was all by herself, but she was carrying a big canvas bag, and inside it we discovered a gallon of red paint. It is still sealed. Industrial grade. The thought made me nauseous. My voice dried out. I needed to catch my breath. Stroke of genius. She ruined my wedding at my request. Those clothes. Oh, what beautiful flowers. This corridor. Just about anything goes. It had taken Jacob and me about 2 years to make this. I had battled for and sacrificed everything for every single thing I had planned. At the last possible moment, she showed up. And you know what's worse, I was completely unsurprised. On previous occasions, Madison has tried to discredit me. Once again, my own family gathered behind her, but I stood alone. That was the worst thing ever. I gazed at the guard for an instant. A heady mix of gardenia and hairspray hung in the air. My hands quivered slightly as I handed Isabel, my best friend, my bouquet. "Are you making any preparations, ma'am?" The sentry stood quietly yet forcefully and asked, "We should immediately press charges, contact the sheriff." I couldn't stop seeing her arrested and paraded out into public view. But no, the time has not come today. Today is not the day. Give her a crash course. I spoke the words permanently, with a voice as cold as ice. I would appreciate it if you could double-check the guest list and keep my folks in the dark if they happen to be in the neighborhood. The sentry left with a nod. Calmness ensued. Isabel spoke so softly that I could hardly hear her as she slowly leaned in my way. "Is everything okay, Lauren?" My eyes darted from hers to the reflection in the mirror. My veil is little off-center. Lipstick is my favorite. However, my eyes were completely drained. I straightened my back and took a deep breath. Jogging needs to stop. I won't apologize anymore. This moment has arrived because what happened in the weeks preceding up to today? That wasn't all there was to it. Tensions rose. Further, the wedding itself, the dress, the arch, and the future husband who will stand beside me at the altar. This war was won by me. It appeared to be perfect only 2 months ago. Our engagement party was a low-key event that radiated elegance as intended. Jacob and I stood beneath strings of golden lights at the Willoughby Garden Hall in the center of Maple Falls. The air was filled with the gentle perfume of citrus and eucalyptus, and the sound of delicate wine glass clinking rang throughout the room. I looked across at him, and in his confidence-inspiring smile he had always given me, I felt certain that we would emerge victorious from any challenge. It was the first place I'd ever felt so safe and watched over. Jacob Reed was more than just a lover to me. He was a rock in all my storms. We crossed paths 5 years ago when he began working as an architect at the same firm where I was an interior designer. He was kind, reserved, and intelligent. Instead of talking over me, he asked for my opinion. Our bond was instant and powerful. Tonight, with all our loved ones together in one place, it seemed like the future was finally approaching. I didn't realize this until I looked across the room. You could see them clearly. My parents, Susan and Greg Miller, were seated awkwardly at a table near the front and smiled as if they had practiced it in the vehicle. Next to them, my younger sister Madison was carelessly scrolling through her phone. Famous person, constantly injured, master of chaos. It seemed as though she would want to be in another place. Our lengthy history of hostility meant that we had never been close. But today, for a little while, there was to be a truce. I couldn't help but smile as she made fun of the toasts to Jacob and me. I pretended not to notice. Seeing them now is a victory, and Jacob's kind touch on my back, as he said, "Don't be worried," was a comfort. That would be wonderful if it were true. Then after that, Susan was the one who stood up. Clinking her glass, she used a spoon. As if the rules of gravity had been altered, all noise disappeared from the room. "Please, will you give me a chance to speak?" The speaker's voice was more sophisticated and elegant than fiery. The thought made me nauseous. My sincerest congratulations are in order. For my beautiful daughter Lauren and her wonderful fiancé Jacob. Their accomplishments are of which we are very proud. Then came the polite applause, and everyone put their drinks down. I smiled broadly in appreciation as Jacob squeezed me firmly. But Susan kept on talking after that. Her tone became friendlier, cooler, and subsequently, "I must inform you about something further." Her glass fell to the floor. After much deliberation and some difficult discussions, Greg and I have come to the conclusion that Madison deserves the $50,000 wedding fund that was originally designated for Lauren. It seemed as if the place had frozen in time. It was the worst. I couldn't help but chuckle in a nervous, hesitant manner as I anticipated the punchline. However, such was not the reality. Laughter sent a spasm down my throat. I looked about, cross-eyed, for someone to come over and jump in. Join me in laughing. I intended for it to be funny. Nonetheless, no one did. Things took a turn for the worst. My hand was gripped tightly by Jacob's fist. My laughing was almost constrained when I responded, "That's funny, Mom. It belongs to me. You gave it to me a long time ago." It was as if Susan were taking off a mask. Her smile dwindled. She was smiling. "Lauren, I'm not joking," she asserted with a touch of candor. "It's more important for Madison, who is getting married later this year, than it is for you." My heart was thumping with pain. "You must be kidding," I whispered. Still she was. Sitting still next to her, my dad had his arms folded. Total quiet. Totally no support whatsoever. My chair slowly slid back behind me, and I slowly got to my feet. Since I was 19 years old, that entire amount has been held in my name. Neither of you ever concealed the fact that this was a custodial account designated for my benefit. As if the bill were only a proposal, Susan shrugged. "While Ryan and Madison are going through a tough patch, you and Jacob both have successful professions. By the way, they really deserve a beautiful wedding." It seemed like there was no way I could breathe. Astonishment, a deep and acute jolt, surrounded the rage. Our budget was meticulous, I said, mentioning that we had already placed deposits. We planned to spend a portion of it toward our first house down payment. In a sudden motion, Madison sprang up from her seat. "In the past few months, Lauren, you might have volunteered to put it out there." Her anger was evident as she cried out, "Oh my God, quit being so selfish. We need it more than you do." With a tightening of my jaw, I turned my focus to her. "Listen, Madison, the issue here is not one of need. Rather, it revolves on merit. A lot of consideration went into this. For this, I put money aside. You want me to foot the bill after you squandered your whole savings on a fraudulent enterprise." It was as cutting as a whip, Susan's voice. Although her fiancé is making every effort, her life is uncomplicated. It's always been more for you, Lauren. With my arms crossed over my chest, I approached. And here I am being penalized for something I did not do. Work for it, follow the rules, play smart. There is absolutely no sound. After a lengthy period of quiet, Susan's cheeks flushed, and her eyes took on a new intensity. Shortly after that, she slapped me as she walked up to me, hard. It sounded like a gunshot in the room when the crack happened. A part of my brain turned. My cheeks were pricked as a wave of intense heat swept across my face. However, the pain wasn't it. Someone had betrayed them. Everyone in the crowd let out a loud and audible gasp. Something shattered on the ground. I was immobilized with wrath instead of tears as I stood there. I spun around to face her once more, my voice unwavering and frigid. Please don't beat me, since I have told you no. I could barely make out a voice on the other side of the room since it was near the bar. Excuse me, but I have to report an assault occurred at Willoughby Garden Hall right now. Not long after that, alarms go off. Nobody spoke at the meeting. Complete silence. Only 2 law enforcement officers arrived at the scene. Someone came up to me. Was that blow to you? The only one that it hit? Nod from me, please. A waitress approached the customer and explained everything in simple terms. View unimpeded. Numerous eyewitnesses. Susan tried to keep it hidden, as her father would say, "This is just family business." But the officer kept his cool. "Assault is assault," the lady remarked. He turned to face me after that. "Are criminal charges being considered?" Even though my heart was racing, I was able to express myself clearly. My response would be yes. 3 weeks following the slap that ruined my engagement party, the arrest, the subsequent quiet, and the aftermath, I started to think that maybe everything had finally settled down. I was totally mistaken, you know. The morning of a Thursday came cloudy and calm. After getting off work, I set my purse down on the kitchen and went to check the mailbox. Within the parcel was a large, official-looking, ominous document. "You can send it back to Holton Farrow Attorneys at Law." It was there in my hands before I ever opened it. Something terrible was about to happen as I sensed a knot in my stomach. In my hands, it was ripped open. Within you would have found an official notice. I was the kid of my parents, and others were suing them. No, when taken at face value, from a purely legal perspective, Greg and Susan Miller, my parents, were planning to sue to recover the $50,000. What claim are they making? Those monies were set aside specifically for educational purposes, and I had used it inappropriately. I stared intently at the papers, and my hands shook with fear. I needed to catch my breath. I was sitting on the floor, surrounded by legal documents, and just looking when Jacob walked into our apartment. While whispering in my breath, "They're actually doing this. They're making an effort to reclaim it, the whole lot." He knelt down by my side in his customary controlled way. Nothing more than, "We'll fight," came out of his mouth. We acted upon it. Claire Benton is a lawyer I hired because she is sharp, doesn't sugarcoat things, and is recognized for her dogged determination in court. She talked with authority, stood upright, and seemed like someone who has seen worse than God-obsessed helicopter parents. As we were across the desk from one another, she made a comment after reviewing all of the relevant documents, including the arrest report, account history, and bank records. "Their argument lacks substance. When you turned 19, the money went into your name. Nothing is off limits. In a court of law, verbal promises cannot be upheld." Nodding, a mix of relief and unease washed over me. For what reason, then? I dared to ask. Still unfazed, she went on. "Because those who care about your parents, would rather blow up their entire route than admit they had a crush on the wrong kid. As I read that phrase, a wave of panic washed over me. Primarily, we cared about the experience. The photo was the deciding factor, that which is managed, melting my foundation to fix Madison's flaws. Judgment dates started piling up. A deposit was made. The act of learning something new, emails. Seeing Greg and Susan sit stone-faced next to Madison, avoiding eye contact with me in that courtroom, was like stepping into a fresh wound every time I entered. There was more to their objective than just getting their hands on the cash. They aimed to change the trajectory of events. At one pivotal hearing, Madison was asked to give his testimony. She spoke directly to the judge and said, Lauren was aware that the funds were intended solely for college. Slowly, Claire rose to her feet. Dear Ms. Miller, did you use the money for education costs only? With a pause, Madison continued. In a hushed tone, she revealed a little sample. Claire persisted unfazed. I thought I heard you said you stayed for 2 years, but then you quit to start a yoga business that bombed. Someone was moving around in the room. The judge leaned forward slightly. That doesn't matter, Madison responded, her voice growing louder. Claire moved up one step. You weren't held to that standard if the funds were restricted. Why weren't you actually? It's very relevant. There is absolutely no sound. Flicking her eyes, Madison clenched her jaw. Received no reaction. As a daughter, I felt more like a defendant in a battle that I did not initiate while sitting through the trial. And at that very instant, it dawned on me, just one aspect of this was a lawsuit. That was the final straw that shattered me, and I certainly wasn't going to admit defeat. Just when I started to see the courts as the main battleground, a surprising new front materialized. It started with a phone call from my cousin Rachel. Lauren, I just wanted to say how sorry I am for what occurred between you and Jacob. Her voice was measured and serious as she responded, Hey, Lauren. I felt my heart rate drop. What about us? I said, my face betraying my disgust. I thought you two broke up. My tone was very firm when I said no. And who told you that? I said. Then after a little intermission, your mom phoned last week. She said Jacob was unfaithful to her. Your decision to call off the wedding was also brought up by her. The entire room was in a state of disarray. Oh no, in no world. You couldn't be more incorrect. Within the hour, my inbox received 3 more calls. In any case, from long-lost relatives to an old college dorm mate. The decision to cancel the wedding left many people confused and curious. Even more outrageously, some individuals forwarded me emails that clearly did not originate from me. The same name, the same voice. Unfortunately, the message's sender address was wrong. Indeed, it was a replica. Someone was using my name to create an email account and was accusing Jacob of infidelity and other things while sending out cancellation notifications. I singled out the offender without hesitation. Not just now, anyhow, but I knew that before. Hi there, Madison. Everywhere you looked, her fingerprints were there. Information presented in an unconventional way. Destruction of people's religion. Weaponizing perception. Jacob was informed of everything when he returned from his site visit. He didn't look surprised at all. He said, she contacted me too. His jaw was clenched as he said, she sent me pictures. I said, what kind of images are they? With a touch of fear, I await the reply. He got his phone back. Several raw images were spread out in front of us. A man I'd never met stood awkwardly next to my pasted face that was Photoshop slop on a made-up night out in an unknown bar. Honestly, it's funny. This, however, was not the case. I figured it out since my folks saw them too. They had received the same false pictures that Madison had sent. She had that in mind the whole time. This seed is dangerous. The only thing I had left was Jacob's trust, and I was trying to poison it. He looked directly at me. Not for a second did I believe a word of it. My hands trembled and my belly ached. The importance of what they were doing took a back seat. In their pursuit of power, they would resort to whatever means necessary to tarnish my character. I reached out to my Aunt Margot, who was Susan's sister, since she was one of the few family who hadn't chosen a side. She answered on the second try. She mumbled something about wanting to call you. I don't understand. I spoke with a trembling voice. She was unsure. Softly, she said, "Your mom is trying to make you look unstable, so no one questions where the money went." This was her way of describing why her mother was protecting Madison, even though Madison had never been rightfully shielded. Upon experiencing that, a shiver went down my back. It was a heavy hit, a legal proceeding. There was an attempt to defame someone, a full-scale calculated scheme to ruin what I had labored over, to bring shame upon me if I want to destroy my future. Therefore, Madison might avoid consequences. A wave of fury washed over me, and I pressed myself against the kitchen island. They had ceased their aimless attempts to break me. If I fought back, they wanted no one to believe me. But I would not break, and I was definitely not leaving. When it came, it was almost midnight. In the middle of yet another round of damage control, replying to guests, elucidating rumors, and screenshotting proof. My phone chimed while I lay fully awake in bed next to Jacob. No name, just a number I hadn't seen for a while. Something else, I too was a victim of this. A heartbeat seemed to skip out of my chest. I stared at it for what felt like a lifetime, too afraid to even hope that it meant what I thought it meant. Afterwards, a second message came. "Alex, I'm sorry I left you alone with them. Please, if you chance to have this number on you, please call him." Greetings, Alex. My brother, 6 years ago after a very horrific Thanksgiving dinner that no one ever brought up again, I lost contact with this 4-year-old. Lots of time has passed since we last spoke. Do not respond to any texts or phone calls. It has left. As I rose from my seat, my breath caught in my throat, typing once again, "This is what they did to you too." How is that possible? Almost instantly, a typing bubble appeared. That being said, quite simply a new taste. My mom attempted to persuade me when I was 17 that I could get a scholarship and didn't have to give Madison my entire college cash. "As the older sibling, it is my responsibility," she stated. It was the worst. Hold on a moment, there was no clue. "It is true. You were in the wrong." After she took money that was supposed to go to Madison's creative camp in New York, money that was never refunded, I confronted her. I told Dad I'd had enough of the family and bolted out of there. I maintained a firm grip on the screen with my fingertips. They lied and said you severed ties with us, but they never told me that. That was the initial goal. Madison is only doing what her mother tells her to do. Mom controls the plot. It seemed like there was no way I could breathe. All that calm and solitude, and suddenly this. That concluded the set. Everyone was a target. After that came me. They had encountered this before. It came naturally to them to do what they did, to ensure that Madison had complete control over all resources. They resorted to humiliation, manipulation, and the weaponization of familial ties. When did anybody voice opposition? They disappeared, very much like Alex. Next, I slept out in the dark for what felt like an age, as Jacob slept peacefully next me. One thought kept going around in my head like static that wouldn't go away. Is it because I've let them twist the truth so often? How much of my formative years were planned? Thoroughly chosen, carved into shapes that made sense for Madison alone. I couldn't help but feel that no one else was in this mess but me. The truth is that I wasn't. I felt a surge of strength just knowing that. That evening, Alex delivered a succinct parting message. "Stop letting them win. Lauren, please finish this." A snapshot was captured and saved, making sure the pattern is there, not just saying it, but they thought they could hide their heritage nevertheless. The person who found it was Claire. They thought I would never see the legal letters, account transfers, and tax documents that my parents had sent years ago buried in a mountain of paperwork. As we were getting ready for our final court appearance, Claire was extremely careful, perhaps almost compulsive. She read a PDF file with great attention that said, "Miss Clay." While saying, "This is interesting," she referred to the financial documents from 2010 to 2012. Her eyes constricted in concentration. What curled up over her desk? I wailed out the question. She handed the paper to me after that. There was a contract at play. The paper features the signatures of Greg and Susan Miller, but my name has been falsified at the bottom. The parties to this $50,000 financial agreement stipulated that the money may only be used for educational purposes, and that permission from parents would be required for any other use. I began dating when I was 17 years old, is considered a minor by the law. They are still in charge of it. However, I was unable to locate that paper, not my signature. To meet my gaze, Cleo delicately lifted her eyes. "Truly, this is deceitful. If they mention this in court, I will raise an objection." This doesn't rule out the possibility of taking more measures, though. It was the worst. Did they actually fabricate my identity? She signaled her approval with a nod. This document is thus null and void. More than that, it gives us a fighting chance. A counterclaim based on allegations of fraud, document forgery, or even identity fraud is an option at our disposal. My jaw dropped when I noticed the signature's striking resemblance to my own handwriting. "I don't want revenge," I said, my voice barely audible. Claire then raised an eyebrow. "Is that correct?" Nod was my reaction. "I simply want them removed. I do not require that they be penalized." She relaxed and let her thoughts roam. "Sure thing, we now have an exit strategy. As long as they depart quietly, we are prepared to show that we have the legal ability to destroy them. False allegations, threats, emails, and lawsuits must immediately cease. They have two options: either fully surrender or we launch nuclear weapons." Months have passed since I last held a pen. For a long time, they twisted the story to make me seem to be the bad guy, the obstacle, and the ungrateful daughter. However, I now possessed proof. Despite their dishonesty, in terms of their layout, those weren't wasted resources. It underwent revisions, finalized reinterpretation, undergone a transformation. Through the careful writing of a notice of discovery inclusion, Claire discreetly told the other side's attorneys that we possessed the forgery. The third day after that, the calls stopped. The court date is no longer scheduled. They were subsequently fired. Absence of rationale. Apologies are unnecessary. Absolutely silent. Nevertheless, this time it was not weaponized. No punishment was imposed. An escape was necessary, despite knowing full well that the justice I sought would elude me. It outdid my previous experience. Control. There was no doubt in my mind that they would be unable to affect my fate going forward. The sky was sky clear in the morning. Jacob and I had chosen this garden scene months before, and when the sun fell behind the Maple Falls hills, it welcomed it. A graceful wooden canopy decorated with peonies and eucalyptus string lights strung between trees, simple, exquisite, and wonderfully us. Rows of white chairs complete the scene. I donned a veil and an immaculately tailored dress as I stood in front of the large mirror in the ceremony chamber. As I waited, I inhaled deeply. Although she didn't think we had succeeded significantly, she did think we had. While our guests started to trickle in, Jacob stood steadfastly at the altar. All the information have been triple-checked. We had attended to more than just the seating charts and flowers. Bodyguards were on hand. 2 armed security guards stood at each entrance ready to take over. Madison is not present. Mary, I apologize. You heard me correctly, Greg. Our caution was warranted. Following that softly tapping on the door, the room was entered by a security guard. He spoke to Miss Miller gently and modestly, saying, "We have just detained a woman trying to come through the rear gate. She looks just like the picture you sent." I clenched my jaw. Would you believe she was all by herself? It is true. Nevertheless, we found a gallon-sized red paint can in her hands, which she was carrying in a large tote bag. Time seemed to stand still. She had ownership of it. Actually, it was her plan all along. Throw out the clothing. The aisle was empty. Hurt the here and now. Jacob and I are starting over, rebuilding everything. She only desired to ignite it. The guard observed me intently while I lingered. We can talk to the sheriff, but ultimately, it's up to you. Put charges back on hold. After that, I looked down at my bouquet, ivory corset adorned with white blossoms. My fingers never trembled. No, he furrowed his brow slightly. Make sure she doesn't come back once you remove her from the property. Look around my parents' neighborhood while she's gone. You should also treat them the same way if they chance to be here. His departure was thus signaled. In the quiet, I experienced an outpouring of feelings that had evaded me for months. Take it easy. No, that's incorrect. We paid close attention to every aspect. Putting it plainly, I was sick and tired of being scared. Isabel stepped inside with her mouth agape. What then happened? Remaining calm was my goal. A can of paint was an attempt by Madison to sneak in. A sense of disbelief set in. Who, you ask? Is that her? Her goal was to ruin it all. Looking up, I met her gaze. Still, she refrained. Removing her gaze, Isabel beamed. In such case, you've already won. As I made my way down the aisle, my uncle, who was my dad's brother, stood outside, prepared to walk beside me. A helpful hand was given by him. Can I handle this? Nod was my reaction. At the door's apertures appeared. Everything else vanished as soon as I stepped foot in the garden. The deceitful acts, the legal disputes. It breaks down in tears. There is nothing. Everything kind just vanished. Because Jacob was there, standing beneath the arch, we looked at each other as if we were impenetrable. Under a clear blue sky, we exchanged our vows. We made a solemn vow to protect one another with all our might, dignity, and affection. Plus, when the officiant said, "You are welcome to kiss the bride," there was more than just joy conveyed by the applause. It was satisfying. We survived the tempest, the din, and everything else they threw at us. During the reception, nothing magical happened. Soft music, the sound of glasses clinking, natural hilarity. With each toast and speech, I felt like I had finally deserved it. Just your average day, those who had profound and abiding affection for us. As the night progressed and the music drew to a close, I looked around and suddenly understood. They failed miserably. Against me, they had no chance. Jacob remained ensnared. Do not poison at this time. As I stepped out of my own wedding, I became a wife and a completely different person. However, I am able to say that now that I have tasted genuine liberty. 3 weeks subsequent to the nuptials, Jacob and I disappeared. Please do not contact me by email or phone. Solitary at sea, we slept in a modest home on our beach trip to Oregon. Woke up to the sound of gulls and danced to music from the 90s as we cooked. My body had apparently forgotten how to brace itself for collision eons ago. We did not serve any subpoenas. Remain silent. Whitelisted numbers should not make any unexpected calls. Absolutely silent. I was even more open-minded than before. We relocated to a little 2-bedroom condo on the outskirts of town the moment we got back home. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. We first put in $50,000, which was the leftover amount. We painted the walls ourselves. The kitchen is a scorched clay color, and the living room is a sage green. Fragrant wedding pictures hung on the wall around the hall. A home it was not. It was evidence, the fact that we were fully functional. We should have won that game. Jacob would devote his weekends to assembling furniture with an enthusiasm that was distinctively his. I meticulously plotted every nook, as if planting something permanent. Jacob said, "Who do you think will be our first overnight visitor?" While building a bookcase for the guest room on a Saturday. I smiled. "Turn off your ringtone." For a second, my thoughts strayed to the feelings it would elicit if everything were to change. Kindly express your apologies if Susan called. Greg would remain silent for a long time before he eventually spoke, on the off chance that Madison became an adult. But almost as quickly as it emerged, the image vanished. "Someone who actually cares," I said, dusting off the shelf. My words had genuine meaning. We sat down to a romantic, candlelit Thanksgiving meal together, our first as a couple. Despite the toasted buns and splashed gravy from making too much food, I had a nice chuckle. Lost phone calls. In other words, I am not sorry. My birthday was not long ago. Put the card away. Nothing has been conveyed. Oh, and you know what? The amount of discomfort was far lower than what I had anticipated. I always seemed to remember them whenever I felt like they were missing, and that's why. That hit, taking the matter to court, these untruths, the false pact, visual art, the images. My size was reduced many ways, simple to overlook, replaceable in a flash. On top of that, I stopped waiting. While grocery shopping one day, I saw Rachel again. She pulled away and murmured after a passionate hug, "Hold on a moment. Once again, Madison's wedding is on schedule." An eyebrow drooped across my, "Oh no." Our days of exchanging status reports are over. Her lips parted in a release of breath. That downtown venue, the Grand Marquette Ballroom. The chef is traveling in all the way from Los Angeles. Big things are going to happen. Your folks took out a loan to pay for it. Skeptically, I let out a laugh. "No problem," she said. "If they asked, would you go?" she said in a low voice. I looked her in the eyes. With a can of paint, she attempted to derail my wedding. Bristling, she looked away. "Well, I guess that puts that to rest," she whispered gently. Nobody was ever asked. Maybe that was their final move, so it would appear as though I had disappeared. But the funniest part is their story may continue without me. It inspired me to write my own. Regarding their online presence, gradually they disappeared. My Aunt Margot finally got back to me. It seems that several of Madison's family declined her wedding invitation. Just a handful were polite. Direct ones, claiming to have stated no interest in supporting people who torched their own daughter. One family explained the situation. The sheen has started to dull. Individuals who had previously nodded now started to whisper. Assuming I refrained from relishing in their humiliation, I felt a new wave of emotion. Joy came back. That they were vanquished is not the reason behind this. However, I no longer cared if they prevailed. And in that space between my earlier aspirations and the options I was forced to choose, it was my peace. A strange calm follows a storm that seemed never to abate. I don't mean there isn't any sound, only so we're clear. It takes hold slowly but surely. No longer is your jaw clenched and a wave of relaxation washes over you. Without even noticing that someone is around you, let out a little laugh. There is no flinch in your face as the phone rings. Simply being able to hear that silence is freedom. When I was a kid, my family was everything. Truth took a back seat to blood. Because of my love, I had to swallow my pain. Forgive endlessly and keep my pride in check so that others may achieve greatness. However, I was incorrect. No one who shares your last name may be considered a true relative. They show up when all else fails. Although it may be inconvenient, it is this individual who ensures your peace of mind. Love, though. Love boils down to respect. Claiming to adore, yet acting modestly. Love without boundaries is essentially simply more aesthetically pleasing obedience. I fooled myself for a long time into thinking that if I just worked more, was nicer, and spoke less, my life would be better. Their treatment of me would reflect it. But my deeds were seldom the center of attention. My ego was at the center of it all. Care obligation, personal worth. They were hesitant to look at themselves in the mirror. As a result, the mirror broke, time and time again, until I stopped letting them control the situation that is. Defending myself became possible when claims that have been made. The rodeo is back in court, protected my honor, safeguarded my wedding. I was only stating my thoughts. I assure you that I was not being cruel. I was claiming my right to something that no one had ever instructed me on: respect for humanity. It is clear that the money was useful. It was bought out, crafted the lives we lead, set in motion the path that would affect our fate. The real gain, though, from that $50,000 was intangible. Sure, symbolically. The reason behind this is that they tried to take it away from me so Madison could benefit. My own existence is to be eradicated. I also politely rejected. I refuse to budge. Please don't take offense. On the other hand, I must protect my honor. What I learned from the experience more than anything else was your peace and quiet should not be disturbed by anyone. None of your parents do. So it is with your sister. Nobody in your family did. You get to decide who sits at your table. I would like to know who would receive a portion of your income. They are the ones who win your trust. You have the power to redefine family if the one you were born into refuses to adapt to your changing needs. When I take stock of my life right now, I see a life that I built. The unwavering partner. Some of my pals showed up. Someone I hadn't seen in a long time came out of hiding to tell me I wasn't alone. Before anything else, even so, I am here. Wiser, greater strength, whole. Put another way, when I realized it was pointless to try to impress people who didn't care about me. It was complete as soon as I was free. The noise has gone silent after a year. Problems averted. Nothing harmful can happen. Never send a phishing email at an inconvenient hour. There is order, only the rhythm of the life that Jacob and I built together. We co-founded a small design firm called Reed & Miller Interiors. Not only do we possess it, but it is also understated. It feels like we're battling for a fresh start with each relationship or new project we take on. Jacob will occasionally ask, "How likely is it that your parents will get in touch with you?" No matter what, I always give the same response. Possibly, but an apology won't be enough if they do. There will be a sacrifice. Nothing is in the cards for me in the near future. I can't stand to wait any longer. Behold me completely alive. When I'm loved, I fly. The work I do makes me happy. A sense of calmness washed over me that no one else had the power to give. Avoiding their betrayal wasn't the only thing I accomplished. It became a springboard for me.